because it really gets into open-ended versus closed-ended questions. Helps us understand better about leading questions. I do always giggle when he talks about the end about certain questions when they don't answer the question well, and he kind of says he's talking about politicians and has the vote for me, and then every couple of years it's election season, and that one always just makes me giggle that much more as we go through. But asking the right kinds of questions is really, really important, and it is a skill and is something we need to practice. So we want to ask a lot of open-ended questions, and then we don't want to lead the answers. We're not looking for a specific answer. We just want to hear the truth, basically. And so I will never ask, do you want to live with your mother or your father? Let's say the parents are separated. Do you want to live with your mom or your dad? Even of an older child, that's not how I would phrase it. That's a very closed-ended question. They can only give you two things. What if that's not one of the options? What if that's not what they really want? But you're only giving those two choices, so they have to decide just between those two. That is not cool. So I'm going to go back to Spitfire, and she and I were talking, and she had the opportunity to live with her mom or her dad, and I was like, I don't want to ask her that, because she was actually adamant that she wanted to live someplace else. And so I needed to find a way at the first visit, before she had shared where she really wanted to live. Okay, I don't want to lead this question, so how do I ask it? So here's the question that I used. I invite you to go ahead and steal it if you want. It works at all age groups, really. If you could live anywhere you wanted, where would it be? Well, Spitfire thought for a half a second, and then she's like, I want to live on a castle on the moon. I was like, way cool. What's the castle look like? Still kind of open-ended, but I'm going down this with her, right? Because she told me she wants to live in a castle on the moon. That's awesome. So it was a purple castle, and then I'm like, awesome. So who's there? And she says her dog is there, and she talks about how her friend's going to come over and visit, after school each day, and then she wanted her grandparents there. I was like, anybody else? She told me right there she wants to live with her grandparents. How do I know that? Because those were the only people, other than her friends coming in visiting. She said the judge could visit and I could visit, and because I'd already talked about how the judge and I were share buddies. And she's like, well, you and the judge can come visit too. She didn't mention mom and dad. And then I could ask questions. So what are your grandparents going to do? And they're like, well, they'll take care of me and my brothers. Oh, okay. So she has brothers, and her brothers had already, in a previous child in need of care case in Kansas, her grandparents had already adopted her brothers, and she wanted to be there, and she knew she wanted to be there. And this was a 7-year-old that was very aware of the whole situation. And eventually she did end up with her grandparents, who were in another state. But she knew exactly what she wanted. So all I had to do was pose the question in a way that she could give me the information. So asking her, she wanted to live anywhere she wanted, where would it be? If she wants to start with a castle on the moon, I'm good with it. We're going to have a fun playtime, imagination thing, but she's still going to give me important information, because I found out who's there and who's not there, and who she wanted to be able to visit and who she didn't. Not by me saying, do you want to live with mom and dad? Who's on the approved visitor list? I'm just like, awesome. And so who's going to be there? Oh man, are you going to have birthday parties there? What kind of birthday parties are you going to have? I'm much more engaged with the child. And again, this is a 7-year-old. You have to make it age appropriate. I have been a volunteer advocate myself on a great many cases. I've had a 6-month-old child. I've had this 7-year-old child. I've had a preteen. I've had teens. I've kind of run the gamut of ages, and each one is a different thing. But for this 7-year-old, you understand this is how a question you can ask anybody, though. One of the ways you can practice if you have children in the home or that you interact with on a regular basis, instead of just like, hey, how was school today? You will get the typical answer, it was fine. It's good, it's fine. And I know a lot of people will go, well, what happened that was good today? What happened that was not so good today? Trying to drag that conversation out of the teenagers. I picture teenagers because that's when mine did it to me the most. Man, it was like pulling teeth with my bare hands on it for a few times. So another way to ask that same question is, what is the best thing about school today? And I was prepared for, well, it's over now. Got it. But what's the best thing about your school overall? What makes, because a lot of times we'll say, what is your favorite class? And I have asked that question. It is a close-ended question because there's only a series of answers, but I'm okay if they say PE or gym. Like, what makes that such a great, what do you enjoy most about it? And, if I'm talking to a teenage boy, it's food, or it's the fact that they get to run or do stuff. But sometimes it might be, I've heard, it's just like, I don't have a teacher that's like yelling at me all the time. I can just kind of like relax a little bit. Okay, there's something interesting to add to the conversation that I have learned. So practice asking those open-ended questions. All right, and then I want to talk about these things and understand that although I don't always go back and say, hey, we've checked this box, we are building on your foundations of knowledge. You've learned about trauma and how it affects children, possibly reactions of children to separation, understanding resilience and overcoming it. We've worked on sound judgment and making appropriate fact-based recommendations, communication, how to utilize things. So I bring this one slide up. I'm not going to do this very frequently, but I want you to see you're learning a lot as we go through these videos. It might be a little bit overwhelming. Breathe deep. It'll be okay. But you are learning a lot, and we're building on those foundations of knowledge, those 7 pillars that we use as CASA advocates. So take a second, pat yourselves on the back, be proud of yourselves, you're doing a good job, and we will continue.